I could feel her warm breath on my face. Even with my eyes closed and just coming out of a deep sleep, I knew we were almost nose to nose. I slowly opened one eye and confirmed what I already knew: light reddish-brown hair, big green eyes, and a small nose. I immediately closed my eye, hoping she hadn't seen me, but I was out of luck. "Daddy, I know you're awake." "I'm hungry," my daughter, Tina Marie, said, lying on my pillow next to me. She had this funny habit of sneaking into my bed in the morning, lying down on my pillow, and watching me until I woke up. It had startled me more than once. Do you know what it's like to open your eyes and see someone staring back at you? The first time she did it, I nearly had a heart attack. Now, it was just something I had grown to expect. "I'm still asleep," I said in a soft, raspy voice, which was about all I could manage. "Wake me in an hour, then we'll have breakfast." "Daddy, you've got to get up," she insisted, kneeling on the bed and pushing at my still sleepy body. "You promised to take me shopping today, remember?" She emphasized the word remember. "I thought your grandmother was doing that," I replied. "She only bought me underwear and stuff like that." "It was high time you learned how to dress a girl," she said. "Daddy, please get up." "Thanks, Mom," I muttered quietly under my breath as she kept trying to rock me awake. With the next push, I slipped my arm under her stomach and rolled her onto her back. "Looks like someone needs a tickle," I said, playfully tickling her sides. "Oh no, not the Vulcan death grip," I shouted, laughing as I grabbed her sides. Tina squirmed, trying to escape my antics. "You see, a long time ago, my dad and I used to watch professional wrestling on television. There were these two wrestlers, one would do the stomach claw, and the other the Vulcan death grip. Both were basically the same move. The wrestler would grab his opponent, make a dramatic gesture, and then, in front of a cheering crowd, he'd tickle his opponent's stomach or sides. It was all staged, but the announcer played it up to the hilt. "Oh no, not the stomach claw," he would scream, and the camera would zoom in on the wrestler's intense face. My dad and I loved it. We would wrestle on the living room floor, and when he grabbed me, he'd say, "Oh no, not the stomach claw," then tickle me until I was about to burst from laughter. My mother would try to put a stop to it, warning us that we were going to break something, but it never worked. Usually, my dad would chase after her and tickle her instead. They were in love. My dad was in the Navy, though we lived in the Midwest. 5 years after they got married, he joined the Navy and was gone a lot, working as a mechanic on a destroyer he affectionately called his tin can. My mom followed him from base to base for a while, but after 12 years, she settled in Minneapolis near her parents, wanting a place to call home. When Dad came back, it was like Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July all rolled into one. I had an older sister, Jenny, and a brother, Tommy. I guess you could say I was the surprise baby. They thought they were done, but then my dad came home on leave, and one thing led to another. It surprised them both, especially since they had given away all their baby things years ago. My dad came home as often as he could, and after his next 4-year enlistment, just as he had promised my mother, he retired after nearly 25 years. He found a job as a large engine mechanic, and life at home over the next 10 years was pretty normal. Jenny finished school and went on to college for a couple of years before marrying a doctor. Tommy wasn't much for school, but he secured a good job at a corrugated box plant, earning decent money and eventually marrying his high school sweetheart. As for me, at 16, I felt like I had the world by the tail. I had somehow made the varsity football team as a sophomore, landed a beautiful girlfriend, and had a great group of friends. Life was good, until my world took an unexpected turn. "We're moving to Florida," my dad announced at a Sunday dinner with the family. Sadly, our family no longer included my grandparents. Both of my mother's parents had passed away years ago. "I've been offered a good job at the Naval Shipyard in Jacksonville. I'm sick and tired of all the snow and cold weather. I want to be warm for a change." "Hell, who wouldn't want to move to Florida?" was the first thing I blurted out. I gave him all the reasons I should stay, even begging my mom to let me live with Tommy and his wife until I graduated high school. But it made no difference to Dad. "Steve, it's not the end of the world. Think about it, sun, sand, and the beach. It doesn't get any better than that," he said, trying to convince me it was the right move. I didn't like it, but in the end, I had no choice. Cultural shock is the only way to describe it. Jacksonville was not Minneapolis. Although it wasn't all that bad, I really missed my friends back in what used to be my hometown. The ocean and beach were nice, but the kids weren't nearly as friendly as those I'd left behind. When I went to the beach, there was enough skin showing that I felt overwhelmed for the first 3 months. When the kids teased me about my accent, I thought, I talk funny. It felt like I had stepped into a movie scene. Making the football team my junior year made a huge difference. Everything seemed to revolve around football. I got my first taste of just how intense rivalries could be when the Georgia Bulldogs faced off against the Florida Gators in Jacksonville. They even shut down schools early so we could attend the rally downtown. In the South, they took their football seriously. In my senior year, I received an early Christmas gift. My brother and his family moved down to join us. My dad helped him get a job at one of the paper plants. Although he wasn't making quite as much money, the lower cost of living and no state income tax more than made up for it. We were almost a family again. My senior year marked the end of my football career, but luckily my grades were good enough for me to attend any college I wanted. I ended up at the University of Florida. I was now a Gator. I loved college life, but as my dad put it, you're there for a reason, and I'm not paying good money for you to party. That was the lecture I received every time I came home. Let's just say I made him proud and leave it at that. I dated on and off throughout college, but in my senior year, I really fell for a girl named Connie. I thought things were getting serious until she got a job in New York, which put an end to that. After college, I got a job with a large insurance company back home in Jacksonville, and life continued with family, work, football, and casual dating. I bought a small condo in a part of Jacksonville called Arlington, only a few miles from the beach. It was the bachelor pad I had always wanted. When my brother Tommy's youngest daughter, Christy, was in a school holiday play, we all agreed to be there for opening night. On that Friday night, though, it was the last place I wanted to be. My mom said the play was cute, but I thought it was 2 hours of my life I'd never get back. Afterward, we went backstage to see Christy, and that's when I met her elementary school teacher, Lana Jean Collins. She was incredible, managing a crowd of kids who were screaming, laughing, and begging for her attention while doing her best to handle everyone's needs. Dad, wasn't I great? Christy beamed as she ran out of the dressing room. You've got to meet my teacher, she said, dragging my brother across the room. Miss Collins, this is my dad, she introduced, extending her hand. It was a pleasure to meet him, and what a wonderfully talented girl his daughter is. Christy then introduced her teacher to our whole clan. When she got to me, I shook her hand, and I guess I forgot to let it go. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Steve, you can give her hand back to her whenever you're finished with it, my brother said with a laugh. It was only then that I realized I still had her hand in mine. I think I turned a dozen shades of red, stumbling over an apology before finally releasing it. No problem, she said, smiling at me. But since I'm right-handed, I'm going to need it for at least a little while longer. We all complimented the lovely play and chatted about catching it again that weekend. She's kind of nice looking, isn't she? My brother asked as we walked to the parking lot. I noticed. I shrugged noncommittally, but obviously fooled no one. My mom snickered, elbowing my dad, saying that was exactly what he had said about her. She was more than nice in my book. Her strawberry blonde hair shone under the stage lights, and her deep green eyes had me captivated. I hadn't had a chance to take in the rest of her, but I would definitely next time. I returned to the play that Saturday night and again for the Sunday matinee, making a point to go backstage with Tommy each time to pick up Christy, hoping for another glimpse of her teacher, Lana. Steve, you must be a real play junkie, she teased, her southern twang charming. She was a true Southern belle, born and raised in Alabama. On Sunday, I decided to make my move. Christy came out of the dressing room just as I started talking with Lana. I quickly asked her if she was doing anything later that night. The only thing I want to do tonight is get off my feet, slip into a hot bath, and forget about this long weekend. Why don't you ask me some other time when there isn't so much going on? I wasn't sure if that was a brush off, but tonight wasn't happening. Almost 3 weeks later, I decided to try again, figuring the holidays would have calmed things down a bit. I found her number and called. Lana, this is Steve Moore. We met at the holiday play. I'm Christy Moore's uncle. There was a short pause. I remember you. You came to all 3 performances. If my memory serves me right, you asked me out on Sunday. At least I was memorable. Indeed. What can I do for you? Well, if you're not busy this weekend, maybe you'd like to go out to dinner or catch a movie. That would be lovely. What kind of food do you like to eat? Almost anything. I had never really been asked that question before. Why don't you pick the restaurant? Are you sure about that? Now she was starting to scare me. How bad could it be? Food is food, right? No. Wrong. Coming from the Midwest, grits weren't normally on my menu. I'd never even heard of grits before moving south. Cream of wheat was as close as I'd ever come, and don't get me started on greens or hob jowls. Over the next 3 weeks, I discovered 2 things. I really liked Lana, and she was a Southern girl who enjoyed down-home cooking. How she stayed as thin as she did, I'd never know. Lana was a shade under 5 feet 6 inches and weighed about 120 pounds fully dressed. She didn't have big assets or a round figure, but what she had was just fine with me. On our 4th date, we attended a church dance where we were the chaperones. We talked a bit about religion, her being a Southern Baptist and me being Catholic. It wasn't an issue for me, but religion was a significant part of her life. I had stopped going to church years ago, but Lana never missed a service. It didn't take long to realize why she was still single. She made it clear from the start that there would be no intimacy before the honeymoon, not even a hint. There were kisses, both with and without tongue, and hugs with clothes on, but anything beyond that was off limits. I was getting frustrated but was trying to handle it. After our 6th date, I brought her home for one of our Sunday family dinners. Dad was barbecuing chicken breasts on the grill while Mom and Tommy's wife, Ruth, were in the kitchen making potato salad and baked beans. Steve, why didn't you tell me everyone was bringing something? I could have made something, she said, looking at me a bit cross. Mrs. Moore, I never would have come empty-handed if I'd known. At least let me help you while Steve helps your husband, my mom said, smiling at me. Lana, you have a lovely home. Next time, I'll make sure we bring something to share, she said, giving me a playful glare. Before I could escape, I felt like I was in trouble. I left for the back patio, not having thought to bring anything. After dinner, the women were chatting while clearing the table, and Dad took Tommy and me outside for a cold drink. Looks like you've got a live wire, Tommy said with a smirk. I can't wait to see what she brings next time. Hey, she's a great cook, maybe a little too country at times, but she hasn't poisoned me yet, I responded, defending my girl. Well, your mom likes her, that's for sure, Dad said, finishing his beer. So unless you really like this girl, I'd keep her away from your mother. You know how she gets when she likes someone. I thought she was going to adopt you for Connie before she left for New York. Dad, I really like her a lot, but she's quite religious and a bit conservative. Conservative? Dad asked, intrigued. Before I could answer, Tommy chimed in, Dad, that means Steve hasn't even gotten to first base yet, and it doesn't sound like he will anytime soon. Steve, if you're just looking for a fling, I don't think this is the girl for you. I think she's looking for something permanent. That's how Lana worked her way into my heart, and my mom's too. After a disagreement with Lana, my mom would bluntly tell me that if I messed things up, she wouldn't forgive me. In that case, Mom, why don't you marry her instead of me? Don't get smart with me, young man. You're not too old for a good talking to. You've never given me a talking to in your life, I said, grinning. Well, it's not too late to start. Once during a family dinner, both my mother and brother were giving me unsolicited advice about Lana. Everyone needs to back off and let him make his own mistakes. That's the only way he'll learn, Dad said, looking at Mom and Tommy. Yeah, let me make my own mistakes, I replied, glaring at everyone. Yeah, let my little brother screw it up, and when he crashes and burns, we'll just have to pick up the pieces, Tommy added. I'm not going to screw it up, well, I wasn't planning to, anyway. We dated for almost 8 months before she would even let me have the serious conversation I wanted to have. Lana, I'm in love with you. I want to plan my future with you. Steve, we hardly know each other. I know all I need to know. What's my favorite color, my favorite food, my mother's maiden name? Royal blue, stuffed pork chops, and not a clue. But we have the rest of our lives to find out the other answers together. It took me 2 months, with a little help from my mom, to convince her I was serious and deeply in love with her. I thought about all the cute ways I could ask her, wrapping the ring in 20 boxes, putting it in her glass of wine, or setting it on top of her dessert at a fancy restaurant. None of them felt right, so I just came right out and asked her, ring in hand, at our favorite Mexican restaurant. When she said she needed time to think about it, I was crushed. That night, I walked her to her parents' front door, shared a great kiss goodnight, and started walking back to my car, trying to figure out my next move. From over my shoulder, I heard Lana call out, "I've thought about it, and yes, I'll marry you." I crossed the distance in 3 steps, grabbing her and swinging her around on her parents' front porch, gushing that she'd made me the happiest man on earth. Don't even think about what I know you're thinking, Mr. Stephen Moore. I'm coming to our marital bed pure as the new fallen snow, you understand? I understood but wanted it to happen as soon as possible. Weddings don't happen overnight, at least not with Lana and our moms planning them. There seemed to be a million details to work out, not the least of which was the honeymoon. Steve, just nod your head yes when they ask you a question, and we'll all get through this with as little pain as possible, Dad advised. If she asks if you have any second thoughts, say no, even if you do. And remember, she's always going to be right from the moment you say I do. So learn to live with that. I started to say something, but he stopped me. After over 50 years of marriage to the same woman, I must have done something right. Just believe me when I tell you your days of being the boss are over. I started to get worried. The wedding was in a rose garden by a lake, not far from her parents' house. Our vows were exchanged in a gazebo covered with flowers, and her Baptist minister uncle married us, even making us write our own vows. Tell her what's in your heart, not just what you think she wants to hear. It all turned out perfect. My dad shook my hand, my mom hugged me, my sister told me to take it easy on our wedding night, and my brother punched me in the arm, saying that for once I'd done something right. Screw this up, and you'll have me to answer to, he warned as Lana and I got into our car to leave. I refused to tell my new bride where we were going for our honeymoon, only mentioning that it would be warm and to bring plenty of casual clothes. I had saved up enough money for what I wanted, to have her all to myself for an entire week. The resort was on a small island in Cabo, only 3 miles long, with 8 huts on each side. They were arranged so that, even from our deck, we couldn't see any of the other huts. How did you find this place? She asked. On the internet. If you know what you're looking for, you can find anything. I just typed in romantic isolated Caribbean getaways, and this place, along with 20 others, came up. I narrowed it down to 3 and picked this one. Well, Mr. Moore, you outdid yourself, she said, wrapping her arms around me and kissing me warmly. Now, if you don't mind, I'm a little tired. I think I'll turn in. I was a bit taken aback as I watched her walk into our hut alone. Turning back, she smiled. Well, husband, are you going to stand there all night? After all, this is our wedding night, or maybe the morning after, she said, glancing at her watch. I'd like to say it was the most passionate night of my life, but it wasn't. I had never been with a virgin before, so I took my sister's advice and went slow, maybe too slow. After enough foreplay to get her excited, she hugged me and said, "That was worth the wait." Is it what you thought it would be? What could I say? Making love with you tonight was something I've never experienced before. That's good, right? She said, sitting up in bed. Not good, great. I know I'm not as experienced as other women you've probably been with, but I'm excited to learn what you like and to experience all the things I've dreamed about my whole life. I may be inexperienced, but I'm a fast learner. She smiled, jumped off the bed, and ran over to the small refrigerator, grabbing a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. She jumped back into bed, pouring 2 large glasses. To us. May our love only grow. She downed half of her glass before coming up for air, the bubbles tickling her nose. I'm sure glad we don't have to go anywhere tonight. I want to drink this entire bottle and make love to you until neither of us can walk. And that's exactly what we did for 7 days. We explored the beach and, best of all, enjoyed our time together. I was grateful my sister had given Lana the lover's set from KY because after 4 days of going non-stop, even I was getting a little sore. Life was everything I had dreamed it would be. Lana would get off work at 3:30, always waiting for me when I walked through the front door. I never tired of her jumping into my arms, kissing me, and asking about my day. Even if it had been a tough day, having her in my arms made any problem disappear. Almost 2 years after we got married, Lana surprised me one night when I got home. She was wearing something that made her look even more stunning, with a bottle of champagne in hand. Pouring us 2 glasses, she gave me a kiss that felt electric. "This will be my last glass for a while," she said, downing it in one gulp and tossing the plastic glass over her shoulder. "So if you want to take advantage of this figure of mine, you'd better hurry because soon we'll have to work around what I anticipate could be a pretty big bump." I didn't quite get it at first. "Earth to Steve," she said, kissing me again. "Think about it. What happens when a condom breaks, like last month?" "Oh my God, you don't mean." "I see you now. We're going to be 3 pretty soon," she smiled. I chased her into our bedroom, relieved we wouldn't have to worry about birth control for a while. My mom went nuts, as I knew she would. My dad just said my life as I knew it was coming to an abrupt end. Tina Marie was born at 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a thick head of light brown hair after 22 hours of labor. I was there for the whole thing and even got to cut the umbilical cord. I was tired, but Lana looked exhausted. Tina was the most beautiful baby girl in the world, and that's exactly what I told everyone who would listen. Luckily, Tina started sleeping through the night after the first month. Maybe this won't be too bad, I thought, until my dad offered a little insight. "Steve, a baby changes everything. Your days of doing what you want, when you want, are now officially over. You'll have to plan everything around the little one." I told my dad nothing would change much, and he laughed, knowing he was right. Life was never easy or simple again. Even just visiting my parents became an ordeal. Food, diapers, and 2 changes of clothes were just the start. We kept a bag packed with essentials in case we needed to leave in a hurry. It got better, but not until Tina reached the age of 5. Despite the challenges, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Money was tight for a while, but as we received raises over the years, life wasn't too bad for the 3 of us. Our schedule revolved around the school calendar, and although Lana had summers off, it wasn't what most people thought. Those who think teachers have it easy should try walking in their shoes for just a year. Lana worked 1 week after the kids left for summer vacation and returned a week before school started in the fall. That was how the contract was written, but she often worked many days on her own to prepare for the new school year. And despite what people might believe, teachers don't get a paid 3-month vacation. Their summer break is less than 2 months. Many business people get more vacation time than that. Teachers are paid a yearly salary based on the days they work, divided by the month, meaning their last paycheck comes a couple of weeks after school ends, and they don't receive another until they've been back for 2 weeks. Lana and I often felt the strain of those meager paychecks. Then, suddenly, our life took a turn. I remember it like it was yesterday. In April, as we approached 8 years together, Lana caught a cold that she couldn't shake. It started like any common cold but quickly escalated to bronchitis-like symptoms. She went to the doctor she had been seeing since childhood. He was a general practitioner who often reminisced more than he diagnosed. He prescribed an antibiotic and strong cough medicine, advising her to take it easy for about a week. When she didn't seem to improve after a couple of weeks, I grew concerned. "Han, you should go back to the doctor," I suggested. "Steve, it's just a summer cold," she insisted. "If it doesn't get better soon, I'll go back." After some persistent urging, she finally returned. The doctor prescribed a stronger cough medicine this time, and while it helped, she still felt tired. I later discovered she was dealing with body aches throughout that summer. Despite everything, we had the greatest summer vacation. A good friend had a beachfront condo with a 22-foot speedboat dock nearby, and he offered us a great deal. We spent our days frolicking in the surf, and I took Lana and our 5-year-old daughter out for rides along the coast. Lana would jokingly scream that I was going to kill us all while our daughter urged me to go faster. We cooked breakfast and lunch in the condo but made a point to dine out for dinner each night. There were plenty of reasonably priced restaurants nearby, and in midsummer, they were not too busy. The snowbirds wouldn't arrive for another 6 to 8 weeks. We should buy a place on the beach, Lana suggested one evening, cuddling up to me on the balcony and gazing out at the ocean. We could rent it out during tourist season and use it ourselves the rest of the year. Then when we retire, we could live there since it would already be paid for. It was a lovely dream, and I encouraged her to look into it. You really mean it? She asked. Sure, why not? But I think you'll find it might be a bit out of our current budget. It doesn't have to be luxurious. All we need is a 2-bedroom place with a kitchen and family room. You look at what's available, and I'll crunch the numbers. At that moment, I wanted to change the topic. But right now, there's something else I'd like to discuss, I said playfully. Are you propositioning me? You do know I'm married and love my husband to death, she replied with her southern drawl. Well, little lady, I've got this problem, and I know you're just the woman to help me with it, I teased, putting her hand on my waist. Mr. Moore, are you trying to corrupt me? She laughed. I believe I already have. Just want to see what you've learned. Lana always said she was a fast learner. I felt like the happiest man on earth. I had the most beautiful woman in the world, a daughter who made my heart skip a beat, and a life most men only dream of. I was lucky. When Lana's cough returned, Dr. James was out of town, so one of the other doctors at the clinic saw her. He prescribed 2 more refills of Lana's cough medicine and put her on a round of antibiotics called a Z-Pak, saying this would clear up anything lingering in her system. After nearly 3 months of on and off coughing, I finally insisted we see the doctor again. With our daughter staying with my mom, we headed to the clinic, knowing that Mondays were the worst for walk-ins, especially when school was out. 2 hours later, we were ushered into an examination room, where we waited another half hour before the third doctor in the practice finally came in. What seems to be the problem, Mrs. Moore? He asked. She's had this persistent cough for over 5 months. The cough medicine helped, but it came back as soon as she ran out, I replied. The doctor looked at Lana and then gestured for her to hop up on the examination table. He listened to her chest and asked her to breathe deeply and cough. After reviewing her file, he mentioned the possibility of pneumonia but wanted to be cautious. Let's get a couple of chest x-rays just to be safe. I felt relieved that they were finally taking her condition seriously. You don't do them here? I asked. Not anymore. The x-ray center is just across the street. Most of the time, you can walk in and have it done. I'll have my receptionist call for an appointment just in case. An hour and a half later, we were on our way to Walgreens to fill 2 more prescriptions. By the time we got home, it was 4:30, and we had spent the whole day going from one clinic to another. The following week brought a series of tests, another set of x-rays, a mammogram, an ultrasound, and an upper body MRI. Yet, we still knew little more than we had 2 weeks ago when the doctor wanted us to consult a specialist about her test results. I was at my breaking point. We're not taking any more tests or seeing another doctor until you tell us what's going on. Do I make myself clear? I wasn't trying to be difficult, I was just exhausted from the uncertainty. The doctor remained calm, explaining that there were 2 masses detected on Lana's mammogram, confirmed by the ultrasound, and another in her lower right lung. We need to do biopsies to confirm our diagnosis, he added. Dr. Tra met with us that Wednesday morning and reviewed all the tests. He confirmed that biopsies on both her breasts and lung would need to be done the same day. It's a simple procedure where we take core samples from each mass and send them out for analysis. The procedure will take about an hour to an hour and a half, and afterward, we'll do an x-ray to ensure we got the right spot. We should have results back within 5 days. Can you do it this week? I asked, trying to remain composed. Not today, but definitely this week, he assured us. For the next 2 days, we were both on edge. I tried to stay positive for Lana, but it was challenging. Honey, it's probably nothing. One's likely a cyst, and the other is just scarring from the pneumonia, I reassured her. What if it's cancer? She asked, the fear evident in her voice. No one has mentioned cancer. But if it is, we'll face it together when the results come in, I promised. The biopsies and x-rays took most of the morning. I wanted to be there to hold her hand, but they told me the room would be too crowded. Instead, I waited in the procedure room, praying for good news. When Lana emerged, still in her gown and holding a bag of frozen peas on each breast, I immediately asked, "How did it go? Did it hurt?" I felt a little pressure, that's about it. They took 4 to 5 samples from each area, and we should know in 3 to 4 days, she replied. I accompanied her to the x-ray room but had to wait outside again. Neither of us wanted to discuss our fears, especially with Tina at home. As the days passed, I felt my anxiety mounting, and I could see how restless Lana was at home. I couldn't understand why they couldn't just give us the results over the phone. Why did we have to come into the office? This can't be good, my wife said, almost in tears. They said they wanted the doctor to go over the results with us. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad news, it's just standard procedure, I reassured her. Still, I felt a knot in my stomach as I braced for the worst. 5 minutes after the doctor joined us in the consultation room, he patiently waited for Lana to settle down and regain her composure. He had probably gone through this hundreds of times before. "Mrs. Moore, it's bad, but it's curable," he said, which set off another wave of tears. It took 10 minutes before he could continue. She had 2 different types of cancer, one in her breasts and a more aggressive type in her lung. There was no way to tell exactly how long either had been growing, but it had been a while. We discussed the surgery, recovery, and the chemotherapy and radiation she would need afterward. "We're going to be as aggressive as the cancer is. Make no mistake, we will beat this," he assured us. I was grateful for his optimism, someone had to be. We scheduled an appointment with the surgeon for the following Friday, and the rest of the appointments would be arranged a couple of weeks after the surgery. The hardest part was telling our daughter. Tina understood as much as a 5.5-year-old could, though we simplified the severity of Lana's condition. We didn't mention the stage for diagnosis, but we didn't sugarcoat it either. She had questions, mostly about what would happen next and how she could help. This was now a family affair. That night, instead of making love, I wrapped my arms around Lana, holding her tight as she let it all out. There was little I could say to fix things, but I needed her to know I would always be there for her. Her tears soaked my chest while I fought to hold back my own. I felt like I was losing it but told myself I had to be strong. The woman in my arms was my life, and I wanted to whisk her away from all of this. But that was just wishful thinking, we had to face this battle together. After 5 difficult days in the darkness of our bedroom, we connected and stayed united, just as we always had. "Are you still going to find me attractive after this?" she asked, touching her breasts. I reassured her that she meant far more to me than anything else. She smiled, though it seemed forced. Neither of us got much sleep in the following days. A few times, I'd wake and see her lying there, eyes open. I would reach over to rub her arm and give her a gentle kiss. There were no smiles at 3 o'clock in the morning. On Wednesday, we went in for her pre-surgery physical. I could see she was still in denial, and I wished I were too. The staff explained the procedure and how long the surgery would take. It was scheduled for 7 o'clock Friday morning. We left with a list of do's and don'ts for the next day. I knew she didn't sleep well that Thursday night. We talked late into the night, and I did my best to convince her it would all be all right. On Friday, I kissed her goodbye as she walked down the hall with a nurse. I was shown to the waiting room and told that the doctor would come down after the surgery, which should take about 3 hours. But as time dragged on, I started to question why it was taking so long. It was just after 4 hours when Dr. Reynolds finally arrived. He shook my hand and motioned for me to sit. "There's more than we originally thought," he began. It had progressed to her lymph nodes, so they had to remove most of the nodes under each arm in addition to her breasts. They also removed about 30% of her right lung, but he believed they got it all. "She's going to be pretty sore for a couple of weeks. But I'm confident she will make a full recovery." I was in shock. He said I could see her when she came out of recovery, which should be in about an hour and a half. I sat by her bed, holding her hand, feeling helpless. Our lives were about to change drastically, but I knew we would face it together. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I felt her stir. The nurses had been in to check on her almost every hour, and she had either slept through it or wasn't quite aware. "How are you feeling?" I asked, realizing how silly the question was. "I love you," I added, hoping to offer some comfort. She smiled, licking her lips. I poured her a glass of water and helped her take a sip through a straw. She was still feeling the aftereffects of the anesthesia, so I told her to rest and we could talk later. When she saw all the wires and tubes connected to her arms, she shook her head and seemed to drift off to sleep again. I told everyone to stay away until at least Sunday. She needed rest, and there would be plenty of time for visiting later. I managed to sneak Tina in on Saturday night, and we had a little family gathering with the door closed. It was comforting for Tina to see that her mom was okay. Everyone felt a mix of emotions, sorry for what Lana was going through, frustrated with the doctors who seemed to have missed things from the start. If I heard the phrase "doctors are human and make mistakes too" one more time, I thought I might lose it. My anger grew each time I took Lana to chemotherapy and watched her struggle afterward. Life felt unbearable, especially when she lost all her hair. Tina suggested that we both shave our heads in solidarity, but Lana quickly put a stop to that. "It's bad enough that one of us is bald. I don't want both of you to be." So instead, we bought matching hats. After her third round of chemo, the test results came back looking promising, which lifted all our spirits. Instead of going out to dinner, I brought home Chinese food, and the three of us celebrated. We felt like we had beaten this, and life was going to return to normal. At least, that was the plan. Lana had been working part-time, but even that was sometimes too much. However, after receiving a clean bill of health, she seemed re-energized, and 4 months later, she was back to teaching full-time. She even started discussing reconstructive surgery. I told her that when she was ready, it didn't matter to me as long as she was healthy again. Everyone said she was the poster child for breast cancer, and despite having 2 different types, she had defied the odds. When her tests came back clean 6 months later, she began talking about the condo on the beach we had dreamed of. The medical bills had hit us hard, even with insurance, but the more she talked about it, the more I wanted to make it happen for her. We didn't consider timeshares and quickly realized that even being 1 block off the ocean made a huge difference in price. My brother found a 4-plex going into foreclosure. When we first looked at it, I thought it should be condemned. It was a block from the ocean, needed a lot of work, and was still out of our price range. My dad called a family meeting. "It's a wreck and probably overpriced, but with some hard work, it could be a great investment. Jenny and David are in for 25% if we decide to go for it. It would be like our own private beach house." The look Lana gave me said it all. There was no way I could refuse her after everything she had been through. We opened a bottle of wine, and Tommy and I let Dad handle the negotiations. Thank goodness we did. It was a tough sell, but the owner dropped his price by $30,000, and with second mortgages on all our homes, we became the proud owners of our own money pit. "We'll focus on only what absolutely needs to be done right now," Dad announced as we reviewed the long list of tasks ahead. Taking on this project was daunting, and at times over the next year and a half, I wished we hadn't. I was tired of scrimping and wanted to splurge just once in a while. "Steve, we can't go out tonight. We have to use that money for the hardwood floors coming next week," she reminded me. Lana was a tough money manager, but when I secretly sold a few childhood mementos, I bought her a new dress and took her to dinner. "You're wasting money that could be better used elsewhere," she said, but I insisted. We had a wonderful night together, and the first night we actually stayed at our beach house felt magical. We packed a picnic lunch and enjoyed it on the newly constructed roof deck. Looking through her binoculars, Tina squealed, "I think I see a pod of dolphins." I was skeptical, but after Tina fell asleep, Lana and I cherished our new bedroom, even with just air mattresses and basic comforts. A week later, after church, I took my 2 favorite women out for brunch at the Sea Turtle Hotel on Neptune Beach. The restaurant had a wall of windows facing the ocean, and we snagged a table right next to the view. "Eat as much as you want, and we'll stuff the leftovers in Mom's purse," I joked as we made our way through the buffet line. 45 minutes later, I was stuffed and happy. "Look, Dad! Dolphins!" Tina exclaimed with excitement, pointing out 2 bottlenose dolphins gliding along the coast. Then we noticed a lone swimmer about 35 yards from shore. He saw the dolphin's fins and panicked, swimming toward the beach as if his life depended on it. He wasn't a strong swimmer, and his splashing drew quite a bit of attention. Everyone around us understood what was happening, and within what felt like a minute and a half, the exhausted man collapsed onto the sandy shore. "Should we tell him?" a man at the neighboring table suggested. "No, let him think he survived a near-death experience. He'll have a great story to tell his friends and family. Why ruin it for him?" Everyone returned to their meals, but I couldn't help but feel relief for the man's luck in escaping whatever he imagined was chasing him. At the 2-year mark, we were nearing the completion of the major renovations on our beach house. When we first bought the fourplex, we held a blind draw to decide which unit would be our home away from home. Lana and I got the top left unit just above my parents', Tommy drew the unit next to mine, and my sister took the last one. We opened a bottle of champagne and toasted our good fortune. Luck is a strange word, it can swing both ways. Just before her 3rd annual visit with her oncologist, Lana had lost some weight and often mentioned feeling weak. We thought it was due to her hectic schedule at the beach house and school. She had been cancer-free for 3 years, and though you never really forget, it was starting to feel like something from her past. A week before her doctor's appointment, she had a PET scan for a full body scan, and the doctor planned to discuss the results at her visit. When she didn't call me at work afterward, I thought nothing of it. I considered her checkups mere formalities. As I was about to walk into a staff meeting, the receptionist informed me there was a call holding for me. "Can you take a message?" I asked. "It's your mother-in-law," she replied. "Okay, send it over to my desk, please. I'll be there in a minute." "Hi, Helen. How are you and Rob doing?" "Steve, you need to come home right now." "Helen, I'm just walking into a meeting. Tell Lana I'll be home about 4:30. "Steve, you have to leave now." Her urgency was starting to annoy me. She had always been a bit pushy, but this was beyond. Will you shut up and listen? Lana's cancer is back." I was stunned. After a brief conversation with my boss, I rushed out the door. Thank goodness my car knew the way home. My mind struggled to process what I'd just been told. 3 seconds after stepping inside, I found myself holding my sobbing wife, trying to piece together her words through her tears. The one word I could make out made me start crying too. We stayed like that for what felt like 20 minutes before moving to the couch. Lana struggled to speak, so I put on a brave face and began to reassure her, lying through my teeth. "It can't be right. You've been clean all this time. It must be a false positive." "But what if it's not?" she said, her eyes filled with sadness. "Then we'll fight it together, just like before." She looked at me with a deep sadness that broke my heart. "Steve, I don't know if I can go through that again. I don't want to hear talk like that. Do you really think I'd let anything happen to you? As God is my witness, we will live in our beach house for many years to come." She smiled, but it was the last genuine smile I would see for a long time. People had their theories about why the cancer had returned, but I just wanted to know what would happen next. A biopsy confirmed our worst fears. Lana had lymphoma, and for the second time, she faced surgery. Everyone at her school sent cards and stuffed animals, encouraging her to return, but this time, she never did. I laid my wife to rest in a small, private cemetery plot near the beach she loved. She fought like a woman possessed, and we all did. We sold our condo in town and moved into the beach house full-time, where just looking out at the water gave her a sense of peace when little else could. My mom said I was a rock for my wife and Tina, but inside, I felt like I was crumbling. Lana continued to lose weight despite our efforts, and the chemotherapy hit her hard this time. Tina and I both shaved our heads, which brought a faint smile to Lana's face, but it felt like too little, too late for all of us. I yelled and pleaded with anyone who would listen, desperate for alternative treatments. I pressed her doctors, asking if there was some new experimental drug we could try. I refused to give up and was horrified when hospice was suggested. To me, their presence signified that hope was gone, and I wasn't ready to let her go, not yet. I created a comfortable spot for us on the roof deck, and every evening, I would carry Lana up the stairs to watch the sunset, cherishing those quiet moments together. I prayed for a way to wake up from this nightmare, but like all my other prayers, it went unanswered. One day, while walking on the beach with my dad, he said, "Steve, it's time. You have to let her go, for her sake and for Tina. Hospice will ensure her remaining time is peaceful and pain-free." I knew he was right, but how could I let go of my wife? I was in denial. This couldn't be happening, not to her, not to us. I pleaded, bargained, and even shouted at the heavens, questioning how a loving God could allow such suffering for someone as wonderful as Lana. My mother told me I was going through the stages of grief, but I retorted that I didn't care what it was called. I just wanted my wife to be whole again. Through it all, Lana held onto her faith, finding some comfort in it, while I felt lost. Her last days were both tranquil and heartbreaking. I was relieved she was free from pain, but I was consumed by my own sorrow. During one of her lucid moments, she looked up at me and whispered, "Steve, I'm scared. I'm leaving the two best things that ever happened to me." She was so weak, and I could barely hear her voice. "You have to be strong for our daughter. You'll have to be both parents now." I held her frail hands and promised that every night before Tina went to sleep, I would kiss her for Lana and remind her how much she meant to her mother. Tears streamed down Lana's cheek as she fought to hold back her own. Around 3:30 in the morning, while I sat on the side of her bed and Tina slept in a chair nearby, Lana took her final breath. We were looking into each other's eyes when a faint smile crossed her lips, and she closed her eyes, slipping away to what I hoped was a better place. For the next hour, I sat in silence, unable to move. When I finally woke Tina, I gently told her that Mommy had passed on. We cried together, holding each other as we looked at the woman we loved. I'm not sure how the nurse knew Lana had died. Maybe it was the silence or the sound of our tears, but she came in, checked for a pulse that wasn't there, and took charge. The funeral was supposed to be small and simple, but it was attended by more people than I ever expected: her students, fellow teachers, and members of her church. I had planned to say a few words, but my dad ended up finishing for me when I couldn't find the strength to continue. At the gravesite, we placed flowers on her coffin and tossed dirt into the vault as it was lowered into the ground. A half hour later, we gathered at my parents' house, where food was being served. Everyone expressed their condolences, but each time I heard someone say, "At least you have Tina," I felt a surge of frustration. My dad took me out to the back deck and handed me a beer. "I thought you might need some fresh air," he said. He was right. You may think I'm full of it when I say it will get easier every day, but it will. We're here to help you with Tina, but she needs you more than us. Tell her you love her and that you're not going anywhere. When you wake up feeling like you can't go on, dig deep and remember you're doing this for Lana too." I had always seen my dad as a strong figure, but that day he opened his heart to me in a way I desperately needed. The smells of her presence lingered with me. I didn't touch her side of the bed for the first month. Each night, I would fall asleep on what had been her side, her pillow covering my face. I would close my eyes, breathe in her scent, and pretend she was still there. Sometimes, my mind would cooperate, and I would dream of her. We shared a large walk-in closet, so even my clothes held traces of her essence. I felt a surge of anger when my mom came in one day and washed all my bedding. It felt like I was losing another piece of her. In a way, it did get easier. I no longer wanted to lie down and die just to be with my wife. Tina returned to school, and when she made the honor roll, she said she did it for her mom. My family took care of what I couldn't, but after 9 months, their patience ran thin. My brother suggested I get out there and date again, even if it meant hiring an escort, but I wasn't interested. I sank back into my self-pity, which only made me and those around me miserable. The one thing I did manage was to engage the law firm of Collins, and Hathaway to pursue those who had treated Lana. I wasn't looking for a financial windfall. I just wanted her name to be remembered, to ensure that no one shrugged off a patient's concerns again. I had promised Lana I wouldn't sue her doctors, but now I felt a need for retribution. When my boss commented on my unkempt appearance, telling me that unless I came to work looking presentable, I shouldn't come in at all, it was a wake-up call. My dad's approach was more direct. One afternoon, he brought out his .45 caliber handgun, cocked it, and handed it to me. "Put it in your mouth and aim for the top of your head. Use both hands so you don't miss, because I don't want to take care of a vegetable for the rest of my life. And please do it outside, it'll be messy." I just stared at him in disbelief. "I'm not going to kill myself," I said, handing the gun back. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, we need to find a way to jumpstart your heart so you can rejoin the living, he replied. He was right. I needed something to pull me back to life. I screamed my lungs out on my first and last tandem parachute jump. The only reason I didn't throw up was that I had nothing in my stomach. I drove fast in my Mustang Cobra, but the stiff suspension felt more like a race car than a daily driver. I also test drove a few Corvettes, which were faster and better on gas, but they didn't give me the thrill I craved. Slowly, I began to put one foot in front of the other while caring for my daughter. Both sets of grandparents were incredibly supportive during this time, but they often smothered Tina. The more they did for her, the more she clung to me. After losing Lana, I found myself stepping into the role of both mother and father out of necessity. Shopping for clothes with my almost 9-year-old daughter was a new experience. While I had often gone shopping with Lana and Tina, I was physically present but mentally absent. Now, Tina wanted my opinion and wasn't satisfied with just "it looks nice." I understood why many men avoid shopping trips. After a full day at the mall, we ended up with 2 outfits that neither of us really liked. Still, life for the two of us was gradually getting easier, and maybe my dad was right. 6 months later, 2 significant things happened. I settled with the doctor's insurance company. I wasn't rich, but Tina's education and our immediate future were secured. I used part of the settlement to pay off our beach house mortgage, including renovations, while the rest sat in savings. The only condition was no future litigation and an acknowledgement that they admitted no fault in Lana's death. I signed. Nothing could bring her back. That night, I took Tina out to dinner, and on our way home, we placed a rose on Lana's grave. Alone in my bed, I cried, feeling like I had regressed 4 months in my healing. A week later, I took Tina to a car and motorcycle show at the downtown Armory. The event was bustling with vendors selling everything imaginable. As we walked through the aisles, I spotted it, a dark mandarin orange chopper with vibrant lime green and fire engine red pinstriping. The chrome wheels glistened in the sunlight, and it had a for sale sign on it. I admired it for at least 20 minutes while Tina watched. I asked a few questions, then requested to sit on the bike. "Do you ride much?" the seller asked. "Nope, not at all," I admitted. "How does it handle?" He explained, "It'll take you a while to get used to the long front end, and you'll need to watch your speed in corners, but it'll feel like any other bike you've ridden." That would have been helpful if I had any riding experience. This was the first bike I'd ever thrown a leg over. "How much are you asking?" I inquired. "I've got $3,200 into it, but I need the money," he replied with a chuckle. "I don't, but my wife thinks we need a house, so all my toys are going." I couldn't help but think that Lana never would have done that to me. "If you're interested, we can set up a test ride after the show today." "I'd like that, but I have a slight problem. I've never ridden a motorcycle before." He stared at me, incredulous. "You mean a chopper?" "No, I mean a motorcycle." "You're kidding me, right?" I assured him I wasn't. "Look, I'm interested, but if you have other offers, don't worry about me," I said, still captivated by the bike. He handed me his card, saying, "I may regret this, but I'll hold it for 2 weeks. Go to the Harley-Davidson dealership and sign up for the riding course. You need this safety course before you can get a license anyway, and you'll benefit from it." After we shook hands and I gave him my cell number, I took one last look at the bike before turning to Tina. "Dad, you're not thinking about what I think you're thinking about, are you?" she asked, looking up at me. "Grandpa would kill you, you know that, right?" "What Grandpa doesn't know won't hurt him," I replied, barely thinking about that at the moment. At the Harley dealership, the first question was the same. "Have you ridden much?" "Nope, never sat on one." "Guess that's why I'm here." They stamped beginner on my application. The class would be all day Saturday and Sunday, and once I passed the written and writing tests, I could get the endorsement on my driver's license. After handing over $250, I thought I was done, but then I realized I also needed a helmet, boots, and gloves. Another $300 later, I was finally set to go. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Tina asked, looking at me as if I had lost my mind. "Mom would have never let you buy a motorcycle, and Grandpa calls them organ donors on wheels." "Honey, This is something I need to do right now. I'm not asking you to understand, just trust me on this one. And I expect a ride before you either crash it or Grandpa finds out." Seeing her mom's smile return, Tina gave me a big grin, knowing we now had our little secret. The book was mostly common sense, but since I hadn't ridden a motorcycle or even a two-wheeled bicycle in years, it took me some time to adjust. The clutch was on the left, gas and brake on the right. Those instructions kept running through my mind as I took off on a bike that looked like it had survived a war. They provided us with 250 cubic centimeters Ducatis that looked like they'd been dropped more than a few times. After a few shaky attempts, I finally got it going without killing the engine. I probably burned out the clutch, but I was riding. Learning the right gas-to-clutch ratio came with practice, and the instructor had the patience of a saint, having seen our mistakes countless times before. That first day was exhausting. I was drained and stressed, but I hadn't fallen over. The second day, I was eager. After making breakfast for Tina and dropping her off at a friend's house, since I couldn't risk leaving her with my parents, I was ready. The morning consisted of figure eights, sharp turns, rapid stops, and proper lane changes. Just when I felt confident, I crashed while trying to execute a figure eight without putting my feet down. I knew if I couldn't master it, I wouldn't pass the riding test. My confidence was shattered. By the afternoon, I had missed just one question on the written test and passed the riding test with flying colors. We celebrated our success, and I was surprised to see that half of my classmates were women, many of whom performed better than the guys on the riding test. At a local hangout, we toasted our good fortune while discussing the bikes we dreamed of owning. A husband and wife mentioned they were looking at a Harley Ultra, and the oldest guy in the class proudly stated he had already put money down on a trike. When I shared that I was eyeing a chopper, most thought it was cool, though not practical for long-distance rides. I wasn't considering long distances, I just wanted something for my daily commute and fun weekend rides. Still, to be safe, I decided to explore other options. Tommy wasn't thrilled about my decision, but I made him promise, just like I had Tina, not to tell anyone. The following weekend, after lunch with Tina, I started my quest for the perfect bike. I quickly realized that a sport bike wasn't for me. Riding one felt like jumping out of a plane without a parachute, and I wasn't eager to repeat that experience. I tested out several cruisers, all Japanese brands. The Honda had everything I could want, but it lacked the thrill I was searching for. I dug out the number from the guy at the show and called him. On Tuesday after work, I rode my first Harley-Davidson motorcycle. It wasn't stock, but it certainly got my heart racing. It was 10 times louder than the Honda, with just a speedometer, tachometer, and turn signals. He mentioned he had a custom windshield for chilly mornings and a comfy seat pad for the rear fender if I was interested. I almost dropped it during my first turn. The front rake was so extreme that I had to start my turn well before the corner, reducing my speed significantly. But on a straight, flat road, I felt exhilarated. After 3 days of negotiating, we settled on a price we could both agree on. I felt I got the better deal because he included all the extras. For just under $25,000, I had a bike that turned heads, including my own. I thought a good pair of sunglasses was in order. I needed to look the part. Tina warned me she'd call her grandfather if she even suspected I was riding without a helmet. On Monday, I arrived at work early, and everyone who came in after me wanted to know who owned the hot bike in the parking lot. I stayed quiet, letting everyone wonder. Most had left when I finally left work, but those who saw me gave me smiles and thumbs up. The next day, curiosity grew among the men, while many of the women began looking at me in a new light. I wasn't seeking the attention, but I didn't want to be completely overlooked either. What I really wanted was to enjoy my new ride. A visit to the dealership for an oil change was enlightening. There were so many custom parts on the bike that they had to order a special oil filter. After spending 2 hours waiting for the oil change and a thorough inspection, I was told my bike was in great shape. However, they warned that if anything went wrong, most parts would have to be specially ordered or customized. Everyone was curious about the price and whether I had considered joining the local Harley Owners Group, HOG. Intrigued, I asked what it entailed. For the next 20 minutes, one of the salesmen explained the HOG. To join a local chapter, you first had to become a national member. I figured it would be more fun to ride with a group, so I signed up online for about $100, becoming a member of both the national and local chapters. For the first time in a long while, I was genuinely enjoying myself. I went on rides most weekends and even started bringing Tina along for short lunch rides. She wasn't thrilled, though, since she had to sit on that small fender pad, clinging to me for dear life. One Saturday, we embarked on a longer ride to a bar and restaurant, taking a couple of hours as we navigated every back road in Florida. While I was having the time of my life, Tina was clearly uncomfortable. As we settled at two large tables and ordered drinks and food, she expressed her frustration. "That seat is killing me," she said, raising her voice to be heard above the crowd. "My back can't take it anymore." She stretched her arms above her head. "You have a real seat. I've got something the size of a napkin with the comfort of cardboard. Dad, this is my last ride with you unless you get me something better to sit on. I'd gladly pay for a cab to pick me up right now just for a comfortable ride home." Just as I was about to tell her she was overreacting, someone behind me chimed in, "If you want, you can ride back with me. I've got a comfortable back seat that's not being used," Nain offered, turning to my daughter. I was about to say that she'd rather ride with her dad when Tina chimed in, "You've got yourself a passenger, Nain." I knew Nain from our weekend rides. We chatted occasionally, but she was more reserved. She always wore huge sunglasses, which made her cute features hard to see. "You don't have to do that," I said, turning back to her. "No problem. I haven't had anyone behind me in ages anyway. It'll be fun, much more enjoyable than riding on that thing you call a bike." I chuckled. "I love my bike, Steve. It's a one-person bike. If I were you, I'd trade it in for something bigger and more comfortable for both of you." Both Tina and Nain were right. My bike wasn't the most comfortable. It vibrated, had a rigid frame, and even my seat could use more padding. I guess that's why it had only 22,200 miles on it when I bought it. It was more for looks than long rides, unless you liked visiting chiropractors. "Dad, please can I go back with her?" Tina asked, her face lighting up. How could I argue with that face? Only if Nain will let me pay for her lunch in exchange. "Sure, you can insist, but you don't have to," Nain replied. "I know, but for a fellow HOG member, I think it's only right." I watched Nain hobble around the table, grab a chair, and with some effort, sit down next to Tina. I hadn't noticed before, but she was almost my height, likely due to the tall black Harley boots she wore. "Just an old war injury," she told my daughter with a smile, quickly shifting her attention to the menu. I'd heard from others that Nain used to be married, but her husband died in a motorcycle accident about 6 years ago when a car ran a red light. She'd spent months in therapy learning to walk again after the accident, and though the doctor saved her leg, it was never the same. "Tina, I have a 2-seater trike with a plush back seat, speakers, and 2 drink holders. You can even plug in your iPod," Nain said. Tina was sold. Lunch was enjoyable, but the conversation was even better. Nain opened up more with Tina than she had with me. When it was time to head out again, we all walked to our bikes, some of us faster than others. I knew what Nain's bike looked like, a bright red metallic beauty with gold and black speckles. When Tina climbed on, her eyes lit up as she settled into the oversized seat. "This is even more comfortable than our couch at home," she exclaimed. I rode about a bike's length behind them, watching as they chatted and laughed together. An hour and a half later, we pulled into the dealership lot. Tina hopped off and hugged Nain, saying it was the best ride she'd ever had. "Maybe next week, if Dad decides to go, he'll let you ride with me again." "Maybe," I said, giving Nain a grateful look. "Thank you for letting Tina ride with you. I know she was much more comfortable. If you ever want to know what it's like to ride a real bike, I'd be happy to give you a ride," Nain offered. No way I'm riding behind a girl, I thought, smiling at the camaraderie. "Thank you again, and maybe we'll see each other next week." I told Tina to hop on, and within 2 minutes, we were heading home. After grilling on the back deck and enjoying a few beers, I was ready for bed, but Tina had other plans. "Dad, let's go for a walk on the beach," she suggested, putting on her tennis shoes. About 10 minutes into our stroll, she opened up. "Dad, do you still miss Mom?" "Every day, pumpkin." "When you think about her, do you still get sad?" I wasn't sure why all the questions tonight. Dad, sometimes when I close my eyes, I see Mom the way she was before she got sick. But I don't feel as sad as I did before. I still love and miss her, but I don't cry very much anymore. Sweetheart, just because you don't cry every day doesn't mean you love or miss her any less. It's going to get easier. The pain will still be there, but it will fade. Eventually, you'll remember the good times more than the sad ones. I hope that would answer her questions. Do you think you'll ever replace Mom and get married again? I stopped walking and knelt down in the sand to be at her eye level. Honey, your mom can never be replaced. I might find someone else, but what your mom and I had was special, and no one will ever replace those memories. Why are you asking all these questions? I asked. Grandma said you're pining away. She said you should be moving on with your life. To pine away just means I'm still holding a torch for your mother. There's nothing wrong with that, and when I'm ready to move on, you'll be the first to know. I smiled at her, even though it was getting dark. We hugged, and I got up from the sand. With our hands entwined, we walked back home. It was a busy week. On Wednesday, we had dinner at my parents' house. Tina made it a point to tell my mother she had ridden on someone else's bike the weekend before. You're going to get your daughter killed, you know that, my dad said in disgust. Dad, I know how you feel, but it's no different than Tina riding her bicycle in the street. He mumbled something and left the table. He'll get over it eventually. You know how stubborn your dad can be. He's just looking out for you too, my mom said, touching my hand. It would kill him if something happened to either of you. I knew she was right, but I didn't think anything would happen. I hesitated about going on the ride Saturday. I had things to do around the house. But getting out on the open road with friends was something special. Tina asked if she could go. That presented a problem. If Nain doesn't come, you're going to be stuck on the back of my bike. Can you handle that? Nain said she's coming, and I can ride with her. Tina insisted. Okay, I'm just asking, what if she doesn't? She'll be there. Tina shot me a look that reminded me of her mother, and I let it drop. Nain! Tina called, rushing over as she put her helmet into the trunk of her bike. Can I ride with you again today? If it's okay with your dad, then it's totally fine with me. Nain looked over at me for some type of response. Nain, I don't want Tina to become a bother by taking advantage of your kindness. Like I said, no one has ridden in that rear seat since I bought this bike. I'd love to have her company. It'll be nice to have someone to talk to while I ride. Well, okay, if it's no trouble, then I guess you've got yourself a passenger for today's ride. The story continues in the next video. Link to part 2 in the description of this video. Thank you for watching and for your likes.